Hello, I'm Jim Middleton, and welcome to our second episode of Flying by the Seat of My Paints. We are an art entrepreneur podcast. A friend of mine just a few days ago coined the term artrepreneur, and I like it way too much, so I feel like that's going to make its way in here really soon. Our podcast is designed for the artists who, like many of us, want to translate our passion to a paycheck. These are tips and tricks from myself, upcoming guests that we have coming on the pod that I've learned along the way. We want to share to help you get one step closer. Topics like how to promote, how to price, how to show your art, how to become a better artist yourself. For the second episode, we're talking about a key factor and focus, selling. So we're not talking about pricing today. Pricing is a whole other topic, and that'll be next week. Just because it's a whole issue in and of itself. But today we're just going to be thinking about what to sell and where to sell. So come on in, and we're going to dive into this. So first and foremost, before we get started, I want you to, I need you to get a pen and a piece of paper, or pencil, whatever you like to write with. Pause with me if you need to. Pause me, go get it. I think this is going to be a really valuable exercise. If you don't have it now, go grab it. I'll wait. I'll be here. Pause me. Now, before we get started, I'm going to ask you to do something for me as we're exploring this exercise. How do I say this delicately? Ignore your friends and family's suggestions. For the most part. I mean, yes, some people are generally helpful, but I want to give you an example from my own world. So I drew for a long time, drew what I wanted when I wanted, mostly a lot of portraits, and mostly in pencil. And then when I found painting and first started to get into it, I had lots of people give me opinions on what I should paint. I live in Atlantic Canada, so we've got a lot of sea coasts, and that was one of the first things that I was told by somebody I do respect and care for, I should be painting lots of sea coasts and maritime scenes and Atlantic Canadian scenes. And not that there aren't scenes like that inspire me, that I think are beautiful, because there are, and there are some that I've created. But approaching it from that outlook of just what other people think I should paint versus what I'm passionate about painting, you can put yourself in a corner where you're doing any job for somebody else. And the whole point of becoming an entrepreneur is that you are making the art you love and working towards making that a full-time career, paying your bills with that, doing what you love. If you're not doing what you love, it's just going to feel like a job, guys. You're not going to enjoy it. I have been unexpectedly thrust into helping resurrect a market, because that's where I sold a lot of my work. And with the COVID situation, everything shut down. That one went away. It was gone. It's been several months without it. We're doing pretty well here in Eastern Canada. Things are starting to come back around again, and resurrecting that market is a possibility. And saying yes to opportunity is something you're definitely going to need to do moving forward. And this is one of those things where an opportunity has arisen, and I'm running with it. So we'll get more to that later, but I want to stay on the point about people. You will have people tell you what they think you should do. And I can tell you right now, you can get some success doing that without question. But you're never going to set yourself apart. You're never going to allow yourself to stand out. I mean, I want to be fair about that. If the thing that you love also happens to be what's popular, yeah, sure. It's absolutely possible that, I guess at the end of the day, what I'm trying to say is your heart has to be in it. If your heart's not in it, don't do it. Don't. Just make something because somebody thinks it's popular. All right. Now, what we want to talk about is I mentioned before, setting yourself apart. You don't want to be a commodity. You want to be unique. To reference the beach scene, you can get If all they care about is any old beach scene, they don't care about you. They can get a beach scene at Walmart or eBay or wherever, right? They don't know whose it is. How many times you walked into somebody's house and they're like, oh, that's a nice painting. Yeah, I really like the painting. Who's it from? I don't know. No idea, right? So what's the chances are they're coming back to you to find another piece? Maybe less so, because it's more about what it was. So now that you've got your pen and piece of paper, I want you to start writing something down for me. First, what kind of medium do you like to create in? Got it? Now my question is, did you write one thing? I mean, I didn't give you much time. Or was your impulse to write more than one thing? I want you to think about that impulse to do more than one. Like, I want you to get specific. I want you to dig into it. I mean, did you put just painting or drawing or making shadow boxes or carving wood or whatever it might happen to be? I want you to really think about it and get specific. Write all the things you love to create, right? Pause me if you need to. Write a bunch of things down that you like to create. All right. Now, I want you to look at those things and then consider what's adjacent to them. So what is similar and close that maybe you've never tried? Do you love pencil drawing? Have you tried charcoal? Have you tried ink? Have you tried putting yourself into a ballpoint pen world where you can't really erase what you're doing, but you can be flowy and create things? We have a local artist in town who does a lot of that work. It's really cool. If you like painting, if you're like me, I use acrylics most of the time. The paintings behind me, you'll see are in acrylics. Have you tried oil? I have tried oil a little. I love watercolor. There's something about a fast drying medium that works better for my brain. And I know there are mediums you can buy for oil and all kinds of other stuff, but you don't know until you try them what works, what doesn't work, what you like, what you don't like. So I want you to think about those adjacent things. Write them down. What's near to what's already dear in your heart, right? What you need to do here is you're branching off in other mediums, trying other things can be the key that unlocks the doorway to a world of art you haven't even considered. 2 years ago, I was a pen and ink illustrator that dabbled in a little digital art. Today, I'm a very passionate acrylic painter. Paint is what I do, but I also do watercolor. I also do sculpture. I branch out into other areas. My point is you need to open all the doors you're interested in opening. You never know what's on the other side waiting. And you might just find something that just lights a fire in you that you have to chase down. And that's the purpose of that exercise. So you've got a good list here of things that you're passionate about. So that's medium. That's one part. The second part of your selling that you have to consider is we got to think about style. You know, what are you drawn towards? Does abstract art bring up emotions in you, or certain color, you know, certain movements and motion? Is it realism that gets you? And then drill down deeper. What kinds of realism? Are you really trying to dig into something hyper-realism and you're using like, you know, Faber-Castell or Prismacolor, some of those high-end pencil crayons, so you can really dial it in, doing really huge works of really smaller things so you can get into crazy hyper detail? Do you like Luke's brushstrokey work like John Singer Sargent, or one of my favorite artists from the UK, and his print is right up there, is Chris Guest. I'm a giant fan of his work, and I think he's like a modern John Singer Sargent. But what you need to start doing is thinking about pieces that speak to you, right, that strike an emotion in you. Create a folder, you know, start putting some of that work, you know, together, thinking about, you know, what styles speak to you, what artists do you enjoy. And I think we're going to dig deeper into that in another episode called Art Parents. That's a subject that was handled well on The Draftsman. And that's another thing here, guys. I'm going to jump off and ad-lib stuff here. There is nothing original out there, guys. There's always somebody who's done it before, said it better. All I'm trying to do is contribute by compiling together knowledge I've learned from fellow artists, from artists I look up to, people I follow online, people who I watch their YouTube channels. I got a great book recently from one of my favorite artists, get it in camera here, Rafi Perez, The Rogue Artist Survival Guide. Guys, there are lots of great resources out there. What I'm trying to do with Flying by the Seat of My Paints is give you a way that we can combine a lot of those things and my personal experience and the guests that we bring on their personal experience to kind of help you get a nice condensed, right? Instead of trying to drink from the fire hose, we can give you a pretty clear cup of tea. You want to do this, this is how we did it. And this is how we learned and who maybe we learned stuff from, and you know, what are some suggested paths forward, right? That's our goal. So like I said, as I talk about stuff, I'm not necessarily, I'm not a guru on high. I'm not inventing stuff that nobody else knows, but I am taking a lot of that information, condensing it into one place where you can find it. That's the goal. So once you have that, you want to start collecting a vision board, getting stickers or notes about them, what pieces excite you, what other pieces of art excite you, what do you want to create, write it down. It can make all the difference in helping you decide what you want to sell, right? Because we want to make a big part of what you're creating, what you are making to sell, something you love to make. That's really all we're dialing into. So, the next part, inspiration. So, we talked about mediums, we talked about style. Now we need to talk about what gets you going art-wise. Don't mean to make that sound bad. For me, I have looked at enough artists' work that I love. I've dived into enough photos and collections and really thought about it. If somebody had asked me 2 years ago, what I was inspired by or what I loved, in all honesty, it would have been a little, I don't know, pedantic for lack of a better word. I just kind of, pedestrian maybe is better. I wouldn't have really thought about it. I hadn't really dug into it because we don't necessarily know, right? Unless we actually dig into the work and decide, what does matter to me? And you need to take the time. You really do. And if you remember in our first episode, we talked about getting to know your local artist community. This is really going to be a huge help. It's a great place to get inspired, see what other people are doing, talk to them about their work. Why did they want to do that work? What made them want to make that specific piece? What are they excited about doing next? Do they have a new series they're going to work on? I really believe that passion feeds passion. It's a gasoline that can kind of get everything going. So, I've been to a couple different art shows in the last few weeks and made a point. I bought some stuff at one of the shows, like Allison's piece up here. Other times I just talked to people about what was going on, what they're working on, what they're excited about. It's a very reciprocal thing. It's great for you to show support for your fellow local artist peers, and it also allows you to get so much more back, right, from them about, helping you decide what inspires you. And as you look through the work and find work you like, or, some pieces will speak to you more than others, I want to say, again, coming back to what we talked to at the first, do not, I repeat, do not just look at what sells. I mean, this can be good to be aware on very basic terms, like maybe people buy more small items, impulse things as opposed to bigger things. But you should never be going in, oh, okay, somebody is making Tree of Life sea glass jewelry, and I'm going to go out and make the exact same thing. I mean, number one, that's not super cool, and again, you're moving more towards that commodity thing. You're seeing something that sells, and you're like, oh, I could do that. And yes, maybe you can do that, but do you have the same passion as the person who went out finding their own custom pieces and figuring out the design and deciding they wanted to do it that way? there's Rafi actually mentions in one of his videos, he talks about somebody comes to a place where he sells, and they looked over the artwork, and he has a very popular series called Seasons of Change, where he does the same kind of tree in like I guess it'd be a quadric. I don't know if a diptych's 2 and a triptych's 3, quadric. I don't know. 4 paintings, all long and narrow, with trees in different seasons. Right, is kind of his approach, and it's very stylized, more a simplistic approach, because that's the way he likes to do his artwork. And people just went and basically cribbed it, showed up at the same place, to sell copies of his work. And what did he do? Nothing. He just let it go. They were somebody who were there for a little while, and maybe they sold a couple pieces because they were selling it less than he was selling it, but they weren't his pieces. They weren't pieces of Rafi art. They weren't something that he had created. And that's part of kind of putting your heart into your work. If you don't have your heart in it, I understand when people are learning, every single artist on the planet copies somebody else, does the same kind of thing out of the gate. For me as a kid, it was cartoonists, that I literally traced cartoons. As I got older and got into individual artists, I mean, it's people like Robert Bateman, who Canadian wildlife painter that I adore. But you can take that love and adapt it into something that's personal for you. There's a great Canadian painter who's passed now that I adore, called Mary Pratt. Mary Pratt did realism paintings, and she focused on everyday objects in and around her home. Jellies and jams, or maybe a series of plates and cups, or tinfoil pops up in several of her paintings. And I didn't want to just redo one of her paintings or set something up in a similar pattern, but I loved her work, so I made a really kind of strange surrealist piece that you'll probably see popping by in my little slideshow up there, of somebody holding their head, and it's surrounded in tinfoil. And I had a whole representative idea and meaning for that piece, but the reason I used tinfoil as opposed to any other medium that he could have had wrapped around his head was as an homage to an artist I love. So doing homages, getting inspired by other people, great. Just flat. I mean, if you want to go home and try making something somebody else makes to learn the process and then kind of grow and build off it, cool. But if you literally copy verbatim somebody else's work and then bring it out to sell, I think it's not necessarily fair to the other artists, and you diminish yourself. You're not really giving yourself the opportunity to develop and grow. And that's just my thought on it. And I think you're going to be a better artist at the end of the day by talking to those people, finding out what they're doing, and how are you going to make yourself unique. So let's look back at your notes. You should have a pretty broad selection, things you'd like to create. So now we want to look at the next piece. What is the time to create each piece, and what are they worth when you sell them? So I don't want to talk about price points. Price is a whole separate episode, and we're going to talk about that. But I do want to talk in generals about price, in that when people come to buy things, you need to have some different options. I like to call them impulse price points, love price points, and aspiring price points. So you can have a big, massive, whatever it is, sculpture, wood carving, painting, whatever, something that's huge that you put a ton of time and ton of hours in, and it's priced accordingly, right? But you can also have things that are small that people can grab on an impulse, and then have something in between that somebody's like, man, that's probably a little bit more than I want to spend today, but I love that. I love that, and I want to take that with me. So having those kind of variety of pieces. When I started selling, I only had original paintings. I didn't have anything else. That's all I had to sell. And I didn't really sell any. I got commissions. We'll talk about those in a minute. But It wasn't until I started making prints. So I found somebody, and you can find services online that can do it too, that can print out what you want. And I see a little message, I'm running low on space. I'm going to pause right here. Hey guys, sorry about that. One of the joys of learning and editing and setting up your own podcast is doing it all on my own computer. And all the editing and stuff I did for the video for the last episode, I hadn't deleted, and limited space, even though I've got like a memory card add-on with tons of stuff. I do everything on the main drive. So we had to move it all over. But that's all good. That's one of the joys of being able to pause. One of the things I love about using Anchor, which is my podcast platform, it has all the tools. It can break it up into pieces. If you're thinking about doing a podcast, check Anchor out. Seriously. You can set up monetization. You can get easily added to just about every podcast platform going. I'm already on, I think the only ones that I'm not on yet, and it's pending, is Castbox and Google Podcasts. Everything else, Apple Podcasts, Breaker, Overcast, Pocket Casts, Spotify, they've all picked me up. So it's really, really cool. It's really, really easy. I'm literally recording the video on my computer for YouTube and recording on my phone for the podcast to go live for audio. So if you're thinking about it, check out Anchor. Seriously, it's really easy. So diving back in, guys, we were talking about, we had just finished talking about, when you're selling versus with other people, so like getting a chance to see their work, see what inspires you. Then we were talking about price points. We were talking about having those impulse purchases, something that's small, something that's a love price point that somebody, maybe they weren't thinking about buying it today, but it's reasonably priced enough that they can get it today because they love it. And then having those aspirational investment pieces that are huge, cost a lot of money, they take a lot of thinking about, but they make decisions to go. Like I said when I started before, it wasn't until I started making prints. So there are services online you can get prints made. In Print is one that I know that's available. But I recommend finding a local printer in your neighborhood because you need to have some physical copies when you're selling. And you can go even, do some original pieces in small. Like I do some tiny little watercolors or tiny little, I buy super small canvases just as a fun, quick diversion. It doesn't take me very long to paint them. And it gives me price point options for people that are looking, that love your work and want a piece of it, and maybe they can't afford to only buy a big painting or a big sculpture or big wood carving, but giving them something that is your art that they can purchase at a low price point, it's critical. So you want to, getting back to the just keep creating side, sharing what you make online, seeing what gets the best response. Don't bother with fake followers or try to just fill your stream with a bunch of crap. Share your work often. Every day if you can, 2-3 posts a day if you can, even if it's here's me working on it, here's the process, here's the next step, here's the finished piece, here's what I'm sharing. This is, I am literally as an artist flying by the seat of my pants, which is why this is called Flying by the Seat of My Pants. I am working on commissions, working on custom pieces for a restaurant that needs to be done. I'm recording this podcast. I'm getting ready to trying to revive a market at a time when I happen to get laid off from work, from my regular, that pays my bills most of the time job. Because even me, I'm 2 years in, and this still isn't everything always for me. But I'm doing what I can to make it that. And that's really what we're focused on, guys, is it may not happen overnight, but if you are focused on making it happen, it'll happen. So then we get down to, once you've thought about what you're passionate about. If you can, maybe you can condense that into, like for me, I create in I'm a multimedia artist. I create with a lot of different mediums. I love painting, probably the primary thing that I do, and I'm inspired by water, life, and light. That's kind of my taglines. You'll find it on my websites, but it makes it kind of clear to people, where my focus is. And then I start building up a body of work, keeping my focus in mind and the things that I love and the things that I want to create. Creating small things, creating medium things, creating big things. So you've got a body of work with things that you love. Now where are you going to sell it? That's the next part. So I'm just saving that piece. And I meant to, again, flying by the seat of my pants here, this was supposed to be a flag on the app. So this is a little extra that you're getting that they're not. This was supposed to be a flag on my Anchor, which they're not going to hear this. You're only getting it on YouTube. But I ended up hitting stop instead of flag on my phone. And I'm just keeping going. Like I said, I'm rolling with it. So we're back in recording now on Anchor. So where that was meant to be a flag. But this will all come together for them. And you folks on YouTube will get that little extra in between. So where do you sell? This is a huge question. And it's all related to the market that you live in. And you need to understand your market. So this comes back to getting to know your local artist community, visiting a lot of local places, visit restaurants, banks, look at your hospital, look at going to art auctions. Like, where's art displayed? Is it only in a gallery in one place? Probably not. You'll probably find a lot of places that have paintings on the walls, schools. Like, who's displaying art, and then how did that art get there? Right? Understanding where are the potential places that you can sell. And that really comes down to understanding your market. One of the first things I did when I started painting and I had all these questions, and again, lots of great resources online, but I went to a local art auction that had like 50 painters contributing, and I walked through and I looked at all the paintings and I looked at all the prices, and they happened to have the auction online. So I actually made a grid and figured out what everybody was paying, what everybody was charging. And just to get an idea of what kind of pieces were out there, what were people selling. Well, here's a place that has 50 artists that every 3 months they put 50 artists up, right? So, I mean, you can sell online, and I do sell online. And I have, work available. People can contact me through Instagram, Facebook, through my website. I sell very little online. And maybe it's because I have a smaller following so far, but I sell a ton in person. So in my opinion, especially starting out, you need to figure out those in-person options. So what do you have? Do you have galleries? Do you have group shows? Have you made friends with other artists? Can you put together a solo show of your own in somebody's backyard on a weekend? Put it on Facebook. Get people excited about it. Are there businesses that will put your art up? And then the one thing that was really, and I give this back to Rafi because this was in one of his early, because this is what he did, and it's what I did. I sell at farmers markets. That's where I started, and that's why we talked about the market before. I went to a farmer's market on a whim. I walked through. I had this body of work. I had actually done kind of an evening market that was temporary. It was once a week. It wasn't an ongoing thing. And I live painted. That was the majority. I hardly sold anything at that market, but I live painted, so I was kind of a draw, right? Because I liked painting and I painted fast. And again, doesn't mean you have to do that. It means find something that you like to do that fits. But I went on a whim, went through the market and asked them how much a table was. It was pretty reasonable. And I went in with the attitude that this cost of my table is advertising I'm spending on myself every week, and I'm giving myself a place where 6 hours, 7 hours a day, whatever it was, I can work on my art. Because while I was at the market, I was creating. Whether I was doing watercolor, whether I was painting, I was making something while I was there. I wasn't waiting for somebody going by and going, hey, you gonna buy something? I was sitting back working on my stuff. And if somebody stopped and had questions or were interested in the art, hey man, I was really excited to talk about it. I'm really glad that they stopped and were interested in the work. We talked about it, thanked them if they moved on. If they had questions, gave them my card. If they thought about a commission, great. And kept on with my day. And I approached it with the attitude that I'm not gonna make any money here. This is a place where I can create, and it's advertisement for me, and it's pretty cheap. It was like my particular market, it was like $50 a week for my table, so it wasn't bad. And the first 2 months I didn't make anything. And then I started to make something. And then I was always covering my cost of my table at minimum. Once I sold prints, I mean, a couple prints would cover that. Then I started making more money and more money. And about 6 months of the year, I was making more, working Saturday and Sunday, 2 days a week at the market, than I was at my regular Monday to Friday full-time, good-paying sales job. So, I mean, COVID kind of everything off the side of a cliff on me, but that's how the process started growing. So for me, I highly recommend finding a low-cost option where you can meet people in person, they can see your work in person, and they can make an impulse choice to buy. You may grow to be an artist well beyond the reach of your local area, but you will always start there. Always. You really need to think about that. And that's why it's important to get out, get to know the community, know where you're a right fit, and a chance to distinguish yourself, because they get to know you and why you create and how you create and what excites you when you talk about your work, the story behind you, the story behind your work. You know, one of my proudest, people bought my pieces because they wanted a Jim Middleton piece. And one of my favorite moments was a young kid who stopped at my booth and walked through, talked to me maybe 3 or 4 times, and looked at the work maybe a half dozen times or more. And then one day he came in to buy a small painting that was like maybe $75, $80 with his own money, with his dad. And he had 20s, and then he had 5s, and he had the last 5 out in change. And it was money he earned himself because he wanted to buy a piece of my work. Right? What else are we doing it for? If it's not for people who are that passionate about your pieces that they want to get them. Right? And that's what I'm trying to get across to everybody. It's all about heart, man. It's the difference between somebody saying, oh, I got a landscape and I don't know who made it, or I have a You, the Artist piece. And it means something to them. And when you put that much heart into your piece and into what you want to sell and giving people options to buy those kind of pieces, how can you not succeed? It's all about you, and you put yourself out there and you don't stop creating and you keep giving them options. You're going to make your own path, making the art you love, talking about what excites you, sharing pieces that are both easily obtainable and ones people will have to save up for. You're selling your pieces your way. This will also lead to what is often the most lucrative way of selling for artists, and that is commissions. Poor Rafi's been taking a beating in this episode, but I'm going to quote him one last time. For commissions, say yes to every commission until you can afford to say no. Commissions will be the one thing that maybe you'll be the least excited about doing, because it won't be exactly what you're jazzed to do, but it will be in your world, because you've created this world to say, this is my style, this is the kind of work I create. Yes, I can paint your farmhouse in my style, right? Or yes, I can create you an emotional, evocative piece that means love in abstract, but it's gonna be in my style, right? Because you've kind of built up who you are and what you're about and what your pieces are. So say yes to every commission until you can afford to say no. That will, because as you share your work, as people like your work, one of the first things they're going to say is, could you make the X for me? Whatever it is, say yes. And to, just like saying yes to that, if somebody says, would you like to donate a piece for this auction? Would you like to live paint at this event? Would you like to showcase your work, sculpture, in whatever place it might be? Say yes to every opportunity you can until you can afford to say no. If like me, I'm still not, it's coming. I'm not letting it stop. I'm still not paying all my bills with my artwork, but I will. And it's because I say yes to every opportunity I can get. And you need to do the same. You know, that kind of leaves us at the stage where we're going to, you know, I want to close that out saying that you want to be an artist who is known, you know, to be the go-to person, you know, for whatever it is you do. Whatever it is you do, you want people to be excited about it. They know what you do and they want to tell people about it. So you want to be that person. That puts us in the space to talk about pricing, which is a huge topic, and as I said, will be next episode. So thanks so much for listening, guys. If you have questions, if you want them answered, you can click the message link in the Anchor podcast on the main page. You can send me an email at flyingbytheseatofmypaints@gmail.com. Yes, I know that's a ridiculously long email address. I'm keeping it. flyingbytheseatofmypaints@gmail.com. If you think we have some good advice here on the pod, take a moment to subscribe, rate us on the platform of your choice. It helps it get shared so more people can find us. And hey, maybe recommend us to another fellow artist who's thinking about making the leap like you have. Until next time, this is Jim Middleton. Just keep creating.